talking about Weiss Farm, reviewed by Team 10, Brittany Coop, Nicola Dipperner, Michaela Cron, Amelia Mandefeld, and Rebecca Lickman. Our table contents are milking procedures and facilities, cow comfort and health, nutrition, reproduction, genetic strategy, and replacements.
To start off with, we're going to talk about your facilities. Overall, you guys have a really great layout of your farm. I really commend you for having all of your lactating cows in one barn and then your post and pre-fresh in another barn with your dry cows. Seems to work out really well for you guys, as well as having your starting off your calves on your farm and then bringing them over to a heifer replacer. Start off with just looking at your stalls in general. Down here we have the goals of the industry standard. For your cattle we use a standard of 62 inches because your cattle are a little bit bigger than some that we've seen, and so all these calculations fall into that standard. Overall, your facilities look really well with your stalls. You are falling a little short in your width as well as your bed length and your neck rail forward with a size of 62 inches at the rump height. Overall, your stall width is a little bit short. It just ranges a lot, so finding some way to fix that problem would be beneficial. Also looking at your neck rail forward and your bed length, some ways to combat that issue is either moving your brisket board up a couple of inches or completely removing your brisket board to combat the length of your cattle and helping them fit better into the stalls. So overall, your stall recommendations, some positives, using sand is a great idea. It's keeping your cows clean and it's keeping your mastitis cases down, as well as it's keeping your cows happy and healthy. Some negatives that we did see, just your curb height. Your curb height is a little bit taller than we'd like to see it. So a way to combat that issue is by raising the alleyway, just by putting down another layer or two of concrete, and that'll help reduce that height and it'll stop your cows from perching so much. Another thing, just recapping that bed length, it's a little short because your cows are a little bit bigger, so removing that brisket board completely or just moving it forward will help keep your cows a little bit comfier. Looking at pen analysis and your water parameter, overall your pens are just a little bit overstocked. You guys knew that, but just keeping an eye on that and making sure you aren't getting too overstocked to reduce the comfort of your cows. But mainly looking at your water parameter. Most of your pens only have 2 waterers per pen, and it's averaging about 330 inches of water access for your cattle. And I use the basis of 3.4 inches of water access per cow, and it actually comes up that your cows are really short in water access, ranging from 300 to 400 inches short. So just adding another waterer into those pens will help keep your cows bringing in water, and it will eventually help increase their milk production as well. Looking at your dry cow facilities and your dry cow facilities, you have 1 waterer per pen over there. It seems to work pretty well. Your stocking rate isn't too terribly bad, except for in your hospital pen. We are seeing a little more animals in there, but just keeping that number a little bit lower will help combat that issue. And then your water parameter isn't too terribly short over there, so I think you're doing pretty good up there. Your water updates, just replacing the waterers in the old barn. They are pretty outdated, and they're also kind of a safety issue. They are too low and they are too wide. We did have an issue when we were there, but it was resolved totally fine. And also looking at the water quality of those waterers in the barn, the water is very dirty, so helping make sure you're keeping that water filtered and clean will help make those cows healthy as well. The cost of putting in new waterers are about $950 to $1,000. This here is a Big Spring 6000. It's a 60-gallon waterer, which would be perfect for the dry cow pens, and it meets the recommendations that we suggest. Looking at your lighting and your louver updates, overall just getting better lighting in your barns. The benefit of this, it will make it easier to work with your cattle and it will keep them calmer, especially when you're milking at night. And then if you added in LED lights, it'll increase the long day photo period of your cattle, which will eventually increase their milk production by 8 to 10%, and that only takes about 2 to 4 weeks to solve that issue. And it will also keep your first lactation animals more productive, as well as it will increase your dry matter intake in your herd overall. And the cost of just updating these lights, $200 to $400 per light, which I think would be really beneficial for your herd. Fixing the louvers, we did notice that some of your louvers are pretty bent up and bad shape. And just fixing those louvers, it will create better airflow quality, and it will reduce the resistance on those fans when they are on. So eventually lead to less cost in fixing those fans in the long run. And cost of fixing those louvers about $300 to $400. Looking at your milk procedure, overall you guys are doing a really great job. The current routine that you use of strip, pre-dip, dry, and then attach the unit is working very well for you. Overall, your total stimulation is great. I don't see any issues with your stimulation time. It's getting into the pre-dip contact time and your prep leg time that I see issues. Your pre-dip contact time is roughly about a minute or 127 seconds, and we like to see that between 30 to 60 seconds, so reducing that number almost in half would be wonderful because it will keep that oxytocin flowing and it will help the cows keep releasing that milk. Looking at your prep leg time, you're at 156 seconds. We'd like to see that in the 90 to 120 second range, just because that oxytocin only will work for so long and it will keep the cow stimulated. So reducing that would be awesome. Looking at your teat-end evaluations though, your cleanliness looked great. I don't see any issues in getting your teat-ends clean. And as well as over milking, we didn't see much with that. There were mostly just smooth rings, very few rough rings, but keeping that milking time lower and not over milking will keep those numbers looking good. And then as well as your post-dip coverage from your robot, we did hear that it wasn't working the first time we were out there, but I think having that be more accurate and covering those teat-ends a lot better will help reduce your mastitis cases in the long run. Overall, milking procedure recommendations, your current process is serving you pretty well. I do consider moving your position B closer to your position A, because that'll reduce your prep leg time and it'll reduce the pre-dip contact time as well. And then maybe getting a third person in there as a runner. They can go and get more towels when the position B is starting to run out between milking groups. Or they can go and run and tell the pusher about cows that have been testing positive for mastitis to get moved to pen 3. So I think that would be really beneficial, and it will also just help ensure that the cows are being post-dipped and keeping those mastitis numbers, because post-dip is real important in keeping that bacteria out of those teat-ends.
Next, we're going to be talking about your cow comfort and your cow health. So first, we'll be talking about your lameness and your udder hygiene scores. So for lameness, the majority of your cows are scoring as a 1, which is normal. However, there were quite a few that were 2+ that we were seeing mostly in your late lactation and your dry cow pens. Some recommendations for those would be to run your foot baths more frequently. That would help you with any abscences or wet line disease that your cows may be developing. Also, reducing their time spent standing on concrete would be really beneficial. You can do that either by decreasing the time they spend in the holding pen before they get milked, or making sure they're getting back to their pens in an adequate amount of time so that they can lay down. Also, increasing the size of your stalls, as we mentioned earlier, would help those cows to be able to lay down more frequently and for longer periods of time and still be comfortable. Going back to udder hygiene, most of the cows are scoring a 2, which is slightly dirty. We had an occasional score of 3, but there's really nothing to worry about there. The sand in your stalls is really helping keep those cows clean. So I'm not recommending any changes there. You're doing a great job. Going into your body condition score, I broke it down by your breeding pens, your late lactation pens, your dry cows, your post-fresh, and your hospital pen. So there I have your average. So in your breeding pen, your cows are averaging a 3.4. We'd really like to see them in the 3 to 3.25 range. So they're a little bit high on their body condition score. Your late lactation pen is also scoring an average of 3.4. We'd like to see them 3.75 to 4.25. So your late lactation cows are actually a little low on their body condition score. Your dry cows are doing fairly well. They're at 3.6. That's just under 3.75, so I'm not too worried about those. In your post-fresh pen, your cows are actually very low. So we'd like to see them at 3.75 to 4.25, and they're only at about a 3.1. Your hospital pen, just an average of 3.4. It's hard to have a goal there because you have such a mixture of cows in that pen. So some overall recommendations for you in your breeding pens, I would take a look at the diet. These cows are gaining more weight than they need for the energy requirements. In your late lactation pens, these cows are actually low, so looking at that ration, finding places for them to be gaining more energy so they can have a greater body condition to prepare them for easier calving. Dry cows, again, they're doing well, no recommendations there. Post-fresh, these cows are actually have a very low body condition score. So looking at their ration, considering any changes that they may need so they can gain some condition, this will help with their calving to prevent any illnesses that they may have during calving, and also to ease their transition into a lactation diet. Then going into your treatment and your vaccination protocols, all the treatments in your farm are performed by Noah and Don. This is great for keeping consistency in the treatments of your cows. However, I think that having written protocols and training your employees would be very beneficial in cases of emergency situations. For identifying those sick cows, this is also performed by Noah, which is great for consistency, again, of treating cows and identifying those that are sick. But training your employees and also having clear written protocols on how to identify these illnesses would also be beneficial in the case of emergency. And then for your vaccinations, looking at the protocol, it's working very well for you. I wouldn't change anything about that.
Talk about your transitioning cow indexes, your transitioning of first lactation cows, overall your expectations of your second lactation cows. So this shows that the fresh cows are difficulty transitioning. We don't know concrete reasons why this is happening. It can be nutrition or your stocking rates. So talking about your milk quality and production. So we have your mature elevations, your lactations are ordered by first, second, third, and fourth plus lactations. We're going to talk about mature elevations, percent of total fat, or percent of total protein, pounds for each of them, your milk fat ratio, and your averages for smack cell count. For mature elevations, usually for your herd size, about 900 herd of cows, we would like to see it at 29,000 to 30,000 for Holstein ratios. For you're doing great in your percent total fat and your pounds of fat given, we would like to see the fat protein ratio being about to 1 to 1. You're on the high end at about close to 1.4 ratio. So we can increase that protein percent in protein pounds by your nutrition later on. And your average smack cell count is on the very low end of linear 1 and 2, which is good for your herd. We see that your smack cell count gets higher in the 300 for your 4 plus lactation. We can reduce that by we can suggest that you call your older lactation cows, such as lactation 7 and 8, were about 1,000 smack cell count, and they also had your lows, your percent fat and your percent protein, protein being at a 2.8 and your fat being at a 3.3.
So nutrition, as we all know, is an important aspect of the dairy in order to get the performance that we want for production. Starting off with the dry cow diet, overall it is a very good diet. There's nothing I would change about it today. Overall, the ration looks really great in terms of energy and fiber that is given. Post-fresh diet, it looks okay. However, there's a few things I would change on this diet. In particularly, I would like to decrease the fiber diet and increase the starch and sugar, just because right now the diet is great in terms of preventing DAs, but is not great in terms of pushing production. And we would do this by increasing the corn silage and decreasing the haylage in this I would also like to change the ration so that there's only a 2% difference in NDF post-brush diet versus the high lactation diet. Because right now the post-lactation is 25% roughly, and the high diet is at about 21. And we'd just like to see a 2% difference because of the fact that if you move the animal up into the high lactation from the post-lactation diet, we see that there could be potential microbe problems and the microbes could be thrown off. And then also I will applaud you guys for using Bovacol. It is a good prevention for milk fever. My only suggestion here would be to give 2 doses of Bovacol 8 to 12 hours later after the first, just because it helps keep the calcium levels high and further prevents them from getting milk fever later on. Moving on to the high lactation diet, once again I would like to decrease the fiber diet and increase the starch and sugar diet. We will do this once again by just increasing the corn silage and then decreasing the forage, so the haylage that is given within this diet today. And the biggest thing that I would have for recommendations when we're looking at the production of the cows on the high lactating diet is I'd like to see there a split, so be able to make 2 different rations, one for the breeding pen and one for the pregnancy pen. And the reason I say this is just because the breeding pen does require more energy as compared to the pregnant pens in terms of production, and by lowering the overall energy that we give to the pregnant pens, we would see a decrease in cost, since energy is one of the most expensive things that you can be putting within a diet. Other nutrition thoughts? For springers on up, feeding lactating cows 2 times a day, if there would be beneficial use of that and it is practical. And then also creating a ration for the springing heifers that are outside, just because from taking them from the grower's facility that they're on a TMR silage base onto haylage and then back onto TMR again, can really throw off their rumen microbes and cause them issues. And we don't want to be seeing this, especially since they're in this point of the lactation. We want to see them being able to grow, put on some weight before they have that calf and they start their production. And then for calves, overall the calves looked okay, but like always, we can always use room for improvement. My suggestion, instead of feeding 1 setting of colostrums, I'd feed 2, 1 right at birth. Within an hour would be ideal, but if you can't make that work, that's okay. And then I'd like to see a second feeding of colostrum given after 12 hours. I would strongly suggest feeding calves every 12 hours as compared to what you guys are doing right now, at feeding them at 6 a.m. and then feeding them again at 4 p.m. just because it allows for a longer interval from at night to the morning feeding, making it harder for them to maintain their body temperature throughout that night. And the calf was started along with water, helps the rumen of the calf development. Here I'm getting at, try to give them free choice of water as it increases the overall starter intake of the calf. As in a research study that was showing depriving calves of drinking water decreased the starter intake by 31% and decreased the weight gain by 38% over those calves that were provided free choice of water. And then when we look at the haylage and corn silage, both of them look fantastic today. The haylage had good quality and will get the job done. Corn silage, same thing, looked good. However, I will note that they had a very high digestibility for NDF. The one thing that I would change when we look at the bunker though, especially for the haylage that I show in here below, is try to take off what you need from the bunker. Don't take off too much extra and then have a pile sitting there. That allows for more air to get in there and it can cause spoilage, which is something we don't want, especially if we're going to be feeding that to our lactating cows. So investments to consider. I would strongly suggest getting a refractometer to see the solids in the waste milk and the colostrum that is fed to the calf, just so we know how much ratio we're getting there. And then also adding in a balancer for the pasteurized waste milk to reduce the difference, because different animals, depending on what you're getting in that tank for the calf, they could have too much fat, too little protein, too much protein. So we just would like to get a balancer in there to make sure that they're getting the adequate amount that they need for their body. And then I would also suggest getting a PCO tank for the back of the gator or truck, if you have an extra one sitting around, that you could just permanently put that there, so you can carry or haul water to the calves on a daily basis, so they can be able to get that water that they need, that they're lacking at the moment. And those tanks cost anywhere from $120 to $300, and it just depends on how many gallons you want to be giving them and hauling down there.
Moving on to the next generation, we'll start with your reproduction. So we see here that your pregnancy rate, your insemination rate, and your conception rate are all above the goals, with your first lactation and second lactation being very similar. The highlights of your reproduction are essentially keep it up. Keep letting Tom do his job. He's doing a great job for you. Moving on to your genetic strategy. As you know, you've been utilizing genomic testing on your heifers for the last 1.5 years, and has been instrumental in improving your herd's net merit. As we can see from this graph, or this table, your net merit does increase as the younger the animal is, and we fully support that. We think it's great. Moving on to the replacements. So you have some positives. Your peak milk ratio is about 73%, which is right about where we want to see it. And your age of first calf is 22 months, which is very good. However, we do see a high exit rate in your first lactation animals at 22%, as well as a high exit rate in your young stock at 14%, which is quite a bit above the goal of that 8% you like to see, or less than. So some of the recommendations we have for this is you can produce less heifer calves by utilizing more beef semen, or utilizing less sex semen. And as you mentioned while we were on farm, you did say that you'd like to transition to using more beef semen and less conventional, and we think that would be a great idea. So in our conclusion, we would like to see stall sizing get a little bit bigger. We'd like to see you change the rations in both post-fresh and high lactation diets, as well as have high lactation and post-fresh the high lactation and post-fresh then need to increase their body condition scores, which can be done by increasing those diets. And we'd like to see your increase in milk production go from up to about 85, 88 pounds. We think that's extremely realistic and very attainable. And we'd like to see you switch over to utilizing that more beef semen and getting rid of that conventional semen, so that you can reduce the amount of replacement